Dear friends, as I think all of you know, Israel is in the throes of a struggle, the results of which may be of great consequence for many years to come. The nature of the judicial reforms enacted will either allow Israel finally to address the historic tension between its branches of government through genuine compromise, or tip the balance so far over that its new coalition government, the most right-wing in the nation's history, will have the power to pass at will legislation grounded in its narrow worldview. Never has the work of the Israel Religious Action Center been more crucial. IRAC, Israel's leading civil and human rights organization, labors tirelessly to maintain the vitality of Israeli democracy and to ensure an inclusive Judaism in Judaism's birthplace by combating hate, protecting the rights of converts and immigrants, ensuring state recognition of and equal status for Reform and conservative rabbis, synagogues, and institutions, and by fighting for women's rights, the release of marriage from the grip of the chief rabbinate, modern educational opportunities for yeshiva students, and religious and civil liberties for all Israelis. Temple Emanu-El is a proud supporter and partner. And this morning, we are deeply honored to welcome back Orly Erez-Likhovski, IRAC's executive director. Orly holds a bachelor's degree in law from Tel Aviv University. After interning in the Supreme Court, she received a master's focused on human rights law at Columbia, and so is a member of the bar both in Israel and New York. An attorney at IRAC since 2004 and director of its legal department, Orly is responsible for some of its most significant legal achievements, such as making gender segregation on public transportation illegal, ending the Orthodox monopoly on state-funded salaries to rabbis, and filing and winning the first ever class action suit regarding exclusion of women. At this critical juncture, there is no one whose voice can better capture the gravity of the moment or whose work gives us hope that Israel as a nation, with help from those of us who love her, can yet rise to the challenge. We are honored that she is here with us this morning. So please join me in welcoming Orly Erez-Likhovski.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom. This Shabbat, we are reading the last two portions of the book of Exodus. The late Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai wrote of the Exodus. From a distance, everything looks like a miracle, but up close, even a miracle doesn't appear so. Even someone who crossed the Red Sea when it split only saw the sweaty back of the one in front of him. The Jewish and democratic state of Israel is a miracle, but boy, do we have to sweat to keep it alive and well. IRAC has been working for 36 years to keep the Jewish state a democracy which respects the rights of all its citizens. We've been working to promote freedom of religion and equality to the liberal streams in Israel. We broke the Orthodox monopoly and proved that there is more than one way to be Jewish. Our conversions have been recognized. Our congregations and rabbis now receive public funding. Our pluralistic Jewish educational programs are now supported by the state. Just 2 weeks ago, I argued before the Israeli Supreme Court in our Kotel, Western Wall petition, demanding an equal and respectable place at the wall for all Jews. This is still not the case, as was evident in the prayers of Rosh Chodesh Adar at the wall. We also fight against the exclusion of women and gender segregation in the public sphere. Thanks to IRAC, bus drivers in Israel are no longer allowed to send women to the back of the bus. Just a few weeks ago, another case of ours ended in a decision granting compensation to a woman who was not allowed to board a bus just because she is a woman. Thanks to us, flight attendants cannot ask women to switch seats because a male passenger refuses to sit next to them. Modesty signs, such as the ones that are hung in religious neighborhoods, are now illegal, and burial societies are no longer allowed to prevent women from eulogizing their loved ones or from forcing gender segregation on the grieving family. We fight against silencing women's voices. Our class action suit against a radio station which did not allow women to be heard on air was accepted, and the station had to pay 1 million shekels in damages. We also fight against the vandalizing and censoring of images of women in the public sphere because we believe women should have an equal place everywhere. We say out loud that racism is not our Judaism. After long legal struggles, Orthodox leaders and rabbis who incited to racism are facing criminal and disciplinary charges. Thanks to us, racist candidates were disqualified from running to Israel's parliament, the Knesset, for the first time in 30 years. We have established a Racism Crisis Center, which offers advice and legal aid for victims of racial profiling and for people who were refused service just because of their race. We take to court people who discriminate others, such as our class action suit against Get, the Israeli Uber, which offers a Mehadrin cab service, seemingly cabs which do not drive on Shabbat, but in fact, this is a Jewish cab drivers only service. Our Legal Aid Center for Olim, for new immigrants, assists thousands of new immigrants each year, and in the last year, we have assisted many from Ukraine and Russia fleeing the war, such as the case of a 14-year-old girl who is a granddaughter of a Jew and was not allowed to flee war-torn Ukraine until we helped her. Our Legal Aid Center also assists dozens of foreign women who are victims of domestic violence in their struggle to acquire Israeli citizenship after leaving their abusive Israeli husband when they face deportation. Thanks to our work, many of them have been allowed to stay in Israel despite leaving their abusive husbands. We fight against extremism, bigotry, homophobia, racism, and misogyny. And now all of our values are threatened by the most extremist government Israel has ever had. But the good news is that most Israelis are with us. There is a vast majority of Israelis who support religious freedom, women's rights, and LGBTQ rights, including among those who voted for the current coalition. When a few weeks ago it was published that the government considers changing the anti-discrimination law to allow people to refuse giving service to people based on their religious beliefs, there was a big uproar among the Israeli public, and the government quickly retracted. We have had many achievements in the last decades promoting the rights of Reform Jews, women, LGBTQ, new immigrants, and Arabs. Most of our achievements have been achieved through the court system, most notably the Israeli Supreme Court. Now, however, the Israeli legal system is under attack. The government is pushing for a complete overhaul of the judiciary, in effect promoting a constitutional revolution which will gravely harm Israel's democracy. Israel is a fragile democracy as it is. We do not have a comprehensive, rigid constitution with a detailed Bill of Rights. The government controls the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. The Supreme Court, therefore, serves as the only checks and balances on the government's power and as the only protection of human rights against the will of the parliamentary majority. Now, the government wants to totally control the nomination of judges, make it almost impossible for the Supreme Court to intervene and strike down unconstitutional legislation and government decisions, allow the government to ignore the legal opinion of the Attorney General, and to override the Supreme Court's decision. In short, there will be no protection for human rights against the unrestrained power of the government. Our weekly Torah portion begins with Moses assembles the Israelites. Assembles in Hebrew is vayakel, a word derived from the word kehillah, which means congregation, and also from the word kahal, which means crowd or audience. In the past 10 weeks, actually today marks the 11th week, it was uplifting to see our kehilot, congregations, as well as many others, join the protests against the constitutional revolution, raising a voice for democracy, for human rights, and for an independent judiciary. Those people are not a passive part of the crowd, kahal, but an active part of the kehillah, congregation. Liberal Israelis who for many years were indifferent understand now that they cannot stand idly by as Israel's democracy is threatened. The difficult circumstances have taught many Israelis a super important lesson about political activism, about the need to speak up in the face of injustice. Our weekly Torah portion also includes the command to keep the Shabbat. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day there shall be to you a holy day, a Shabbat of rest. For the past weeks, every Shabbat, hundreds of thousands of Israelis go out to the streets and pray with our feet, as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said. Last Shabbat, there were 500,000 Israelis protesting in the streets. This is the equivalent of 16 million Americans protesting every week for 10 weeks straight. This is our holy task in the past weeks, and every week brings with it new crowds and congregations who join the protest. We initiated a campaign under the slogan, Defending Democracy in the Name of Judaism, because we offer a humanistic Jewish alternative to the extremist and racist version of Judaism that the government is espousing. We hold Havdalah ceremonies immediately before the protests begin in cities all across Israel, offering our congregants a unique transition from the rest of Shabbat to the activism of the protests. The hundreds of thousands of Israelis who voice their opposition to the dangerous initiatives of the government are joined by many liberal Jews outside of Israel. In an email campaign we initiated a few weeks ago, more than 15,000 emails have been sent to the Israeli Prime Minister, the Justice Minister, and Israeli embassies and consulates all around the world. Let me tell you, your voice matters. It is not only your right, but it is also your duty to fight for and to ensure the democratic nature of the Jewish state, which is the homeland of all Jews. 3 weeks ago, Rabbi Rick Jacobs addressed 150,000 Israelis in the central protest in Tel Aviv. After his speech, I walked with him out of the demonstration. Israeli protesters stopped us and said to Rabbi Jacobs how meaningful it was for them to know that liberal Jews from North America are with them, with us. The public pressure from within and outside Israel has already made a difference. The bills which seek to undermine our constitutional structure are not being promoted as speedily as the government wanted. According to surveys, a large majority of Israelis are against the legal revolution. The President of Israel and many others call for a freeze of the dangerous bills and for a deep dialogue about the nature of the Israeli legal system. As we heard, the book of Exodus ends with a cloud which covers Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting or congregation, not allowing Moses to enter the place. In these times, we feel as if a cloud covers us and we are in search of a pillar of fire to show us the way. Just last week, we read about the golden calf, which symbolizes a crisis of faith and a crisis of leadership. We are now in a moment of crisis in Israel. But out of this moment arises a moment of opportunity, a moment of the awakening of Israelis, standing up for the values of equality and dignity for all like never before. 130 years ago, Orly Erez-Likhovski wrote his powerful song, I Believe, which says, Laugh, oh laugh at all my visions. I, the dreamer, tell you true. Laugh, for I believe in humankind, for I still believe in you. For my soul still yearns for freedom. I've not sold it to a calf of gold. For I still believe in humankind, in its spirit great and bold. And so I end with hope. Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost. We will continue to fight for the soul of our beloved Israel. Together we will make sure Israel remains true to its founding values of democracy and justice. Shabbat Shalom.